Hello, I'm Michael Fiorentino, and you're listening to the Media Renaissance Show. Today, we're going to talk to Gaylord Warner and hear about his journey through traditional and decentralized finance, and that includes a lot of Web3 crypto stuff. Gaylord tells us stories about his time in Japan and across the EU, and we discuss lots about Arroz Estudios, which is a Web3 collective that empowers artists, also allows people to shill and chill, and you're going to learn what that means. We also speak about the origins of banking, which come from the Renaissance, and how artists like Leonardo da Vinci were funded. We're also going to speak about how blockchain ledgers are the new printing press. We cover some crypto 101 terms, such as proof of work, proof of stake, layer 1, fungibility, and DAOs. We talk about the Intra.Luxe project that we've been working on, which takes AI-generated or human-created content and creates a new type of fractionalized streaming NFT that can work on marketplace exchanges. Sounds complicated, we'll break it down. And we're going to hear why the adoption of crypto makes it feel like 1997 and the birth of the internet all over again. Let's jump right in. Hello, welcome to Media Renaissance. I am Michael Fiorentino, and I'm here today with Gaylord Warner.
Hello.
Bonsoir, Gaylord Warner. I met Gaylord at Arroz Estudios, which is sort of an art collective. It's actually a party space that I used to go to events and watch DJs through all hours of the night when I first came to Portugal. And it evolved into, let's say, Sunday markets, and they had an artist residency, and then they got into Web3 and crypto, and they started having these Web3 Wednesday hangouts. And so because it was in between my office in downtown Lisbon and my home in Maravilha, it was just so easy for me to hop off the bus at 6 p.m. and grab a beer or the what is it? Why not? The why not?
Why not soda? Yeah.
The why not soda, which is made with yerba mate and lemon.
Kombucha like thingy.
Or just a beer, and just sit and hang out and go from knowing basic Web3 stuff to more of a concept of what are these applications. And this is also pretty much that was like my theme of 2022, where I would learn about this stuff, and it was in a very casual, inviting setting. And it was also an interesting year because there were so many ups and downs during that time period. So I met Gaylord at Arroz Estudios, and he ended up becoming the head of Web3 for a lot of those initiatives and doing a lot in the community and events. Worked together in some aspects where diving into the concepts that I had outlined with Vixtape and the underlying intellectual property and how it works in these Web3 contexts, and the things that I had already sort of predicted or written years ago, and comparing them to the new terminology and how it exists and how that actually practically works. So right now we're in my office in Baixa in Lisbon, right by the Praça do Comércio, and Gaylord spent several hours here with me and whiteboarding and going through ideas and concepts and trying to sketch out, how does DAO governance stuff work. Let's start by just hearing about your past. Where are you from? What are you doing? Why are you here?
Yeah, so as my lovely accent tells, I'm French. I grew up in France. I actually started my professional life by expatriating myself to Japan. So I ended up spending more than 9 years in Japan. So in this previous professional life of mine, I used to be a developer working in market finance. So I started working for a French company in Japan, then moved to a Japanese company, Japanese bank, quite different, and then a US hedge fund, quite different as well. That was a big chunk of my life until I decided to bring back the family to Europe. And when coming back here and kind of trying to settle on a place where to live, Portugal ticked all the boxes, and I arrived with the big family van full of luggages and a couple of kids to decide to settle in Portugal. Although we actually never came here before.
How many years were you in Japan?
9 something.
9 years.
Yeah, a bit more than 9 years. So I arrived in Japan with one suitcase, 25 years old. First time I was getting out of Europe, really, and probably the third or fourth time I was taking the plane. And I came back 9 years later with a lot more than one suitcase and 2 kids. And it was, I was a different person, I guess. It was nice, but I wanted to do something different. And one of these things I wanted to do different was actually to get out of this more like traditional, stable as well, lucrative professional path in finance, and actually try something different with Web3 and crypto that I had discovered just before quitting my job. And that was one of the reasons also that made me come to Lisbon and Portugal.
And the term that people use often is TradFi for traditional finance.
Yes, traditional finance in opposition to decentralized finance, DeFi, which actually, I mean, we had this so-called DeFi summer in the summer of 2020, which was really a few months before I actually quit my job, and that was one of the first thing I actually got really deep into when I changed life basically. And I mean the movement is still going right now, and there is the whole thing of being able to use some financial mechanism, not always inspired from traditional finance, going bankless. And I guess we're gonna keep talking about that, especially in the light of the recent events with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. That's that's very up to date still now.
So don't cover your head if you can, or like touch your mouth. Everyone has a beard that's been here so far. So they're like
Yeah, I shaved.
touching it. I know. Back when you had a beard, I used to say that you were my straight French twin, which would say a lot of things about me when we both had beards and would stand next to each other. So you left France, you go to Japan. Why Japan?
It was kind of random, to be fair. The only criteria I had, so again, at that time, 25 years old, I was just looking for a job, interesting job in finance, because that was my specialization. But the only criteria was like outside of France.
Okay.
And this came up. I really had this nice 1 hour interview over the phone, and at the end they say, okay, I have a job in Tokyo, you want it? It was actually a few months after Fukushima. I had the feeling that it was actually for me a chance, an opportunity, because maybe too many people had refused the opportunity to go because of the earthquake and the nuclear plants being damaged.
And your wife worked in Japan too, right?
Yes. So she joined me. She had a job already, but she joined me. She had a job in France back then, and she joined me after 6 months. Because the way I got in Japan was with this special program subsidized by the government called VIE. It's like volunteering international in enterprise. But I got hired permanently after that. So that's where we stayed.
What's something you could tell me about the difference of Japanese work culture versus other work cultures? What's a pain in the ass and what's cool?
Never being home with the family, etc. That's kind of true, but that's especially true from what I've noticed for like kind of older generations, so people above 45, 50 years old. You still have some presenteeism, so to speak.
Wait, what does that mean?
Presenteeism is like you're here, you're present physically, but you're not really doing much because people stay too long for nothing. Sometimes because the boss is staying, so everybody's waiting for the boss to leave. The boss leaves, and after 2 minutes, everybody's gone. So this kind of situation are a bit, petty, infantile, a bit ridiculous. But to be fair, that's something I definitely noticed as well in the French system. French companies are a bit like that too.
So when you decided that you wanted to leave Japan and you wanted to come to Europe, what made you not pick France, which is the obvious choice?
And our original plan was to get in the car and kind of do a tour of Europe. So we did that for 2 months, a tour of France, and then stayed in France near Bordeaux for like 4 months. It was great. Being in France, we put my older daughter to school. It was her first school experience, so she loved it. But maybe just being French in France, I don't know. Maybe the atmosphere, the mindset. It's I don't really feel aligned with that. It's like maybe not adventurous enough.
But you wanted to be in Europe.
I wanted to be in Europe, yes, because I guess that's when I left and spent so much time actually outside of Europe that actually that's how I felt actually more European, more French as well actually, to be fair. But yeah, there is when you're outside of Europe, you realize that even if you speak to it's not only about the language, but you speak with a Swedish person, even like British, even though that's debatable if they're European or not, but German, even Spanish, Italian. It's not only about Mediterranean. It's really there is a European thing that we, without knowing, we kind of share a set of values, the way we see life. We like to eat, this kind of stuff.
The priorities.
It's definitely easier to speak to a European. You don't need to say as many things compared to an Asian person, Japanese, Chinese, Thai, or even American, to be fair. I mean, Americans are quite different in their mindset.
We love to fill the void with a bunch of useless conversation. So you're saying with Europeans you could just like be there.
Because maybe Americans, they like to have like chit chat, and it seems like they would seem to be super friendly, and the next day like, oh mate, it was great yesterday, and like being very distant. This is a typical stereotype.
And it depends where in the US you're from. So when you moved to Portugal, you never been in this country before?
No, never, no. It was.
And you just chose it?
Yeah, it was ticking all the boxes. I mean, it was the right choice, but I mean.
What were the boxes?
You know, like a nice entrepreneurial tissue, like a nice startup scene, a mindset of people being kind of open, but not overly open and hypocritical like some other countries. The foods allegedly quite good. I wanted to be next to the ocean. The weather is good. So typically, I had like this like startup entrepreneurial aspect. Like Berlin typically was ticking the box, but if you add the climate criteria, well, it's not ticking the box.
I had a moment too where I was looking at where I wanted to base, entrepreneurial startup activities in Europe, and it did end up being Berlin or Lisbon, and there was a lot of reasons. Actually, I took weather out because I thought, in the U.S., Florida and California get a lot of people just because of the weather, and that's not necessarily great for these
Yeah.
situations. It kind of skews certain things. But I did feel like Lisbon was the new Berlin, or there was something new, or there was new attraction of people coming here, and it was a good time to just jump in and intermix with all that.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you arrived, which was actually quite before me, and I think you really kind of capture the kind of all the hype.
Well, one thing I noticed at Arroz Studios, it was 2022. It's a year that the price of all currencies was just climbing, climbing, climbing. And I remember I was there one day in May, and let's say that the head of Arroz Studios said, "Are you guys looking at what's happening?" It was Shilling and Dilling was the event, right?
Ah no, shilling and chilling.
Oh, okay. I was dilling. I wasn't chilling. I should have been chilling.
No, it's shilling and chilling.
Okay, so there's an event called Shilling and Chilling, and that was a Wednesday event, and we were all sitting around a table, and someone was checking, their currencies, which is called shilling, right?
Shilling now is more like advertising in an aggressive way. That's kind of a crypto term. Typically, you would do that on Twitter. You would shill your project, and that's making a thread on Twitter saying, "Oh, my project is great, and here's why it's gonna 10x or 1000x in 6 months, 1 out of 18."
Oh, I should do that.
Yeah,
I'm
you
bad
would
at
be
doing that.
you would be a good shiller.
I think we call that a bullshitter in America.
Well, that's the same, but there's another word for it that's less transparent.
In my family, we had a phrase, "Don't bullshit a bullshitter."
Yeah, well, don't shill a shiller. That would.
Don't shill a shiller. So let's talk about what Arroz Studio does and how you got connected.
Yeah. So Arroz Studios originally, as you explained at the beginning, is so it's a cultural.
Well,
non-profit-
arroz means rice.
But yeah, arroz means rice because the one of the co-founder, the president, Steven, he's into rice. That's his
Really?
favorite food. Yeah, he had another company before called Nice Like Rice. His DJ name is Steven Rice. He likes rice. I mean, rice is a great cereal, so.
Not my favorite, but okay. Well, this structure is it's a series of parking garages, and it's mechanical, industrial, but then it has paint, and now it has shipping containers and a podcasting room and this sort of indoor outdoor space. There's been NFT exhibitions there, so a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
I mean,
going
the
on.
way it was created, as I said, it's like a non-profit cultural organization. So originally it was the other side of the river, but a similar kind of setup with basically a set of studios for artists. By artists, I mean, it's really all kind of artists like designers, video editors, painters, bands, musicians, DJ. I mean, any kind of creation that can be involved. So they offer studios for them to basically work on their stuff. The pandemic hit, and that's actually how they got into Web3, because when you can't have physical events, that's when they had this idea of actually doing this NFT festival before NFT were cool. And they organized it in the metaverse, a metaverse called CryptoVoxel. And that was the first rare effects event, a digital festival, so to speak, in CryptoVoxels. But it was definitely the first European NFT festival. The festival aspect is come with the music programmation, so it lasts for a few days, so 1 week. And you do have concerts every day. And at the same time, you have this NFT exhibition, so a digital art exhibition. Physically, well, apart from the first edition, which was in the metaverse, but from the second edition onwards, you would go to Arroz and actually experience physically IRL the art exhibition in there, with the possibility to actually buy the pieces because they were minted as a change involved.
But then also, Arroz Studios had a relationship with Near and introduced a lot of people.
Yeah, with Near Protocol Studios was one of the first creatives DAO involved in the expansions and the growth of Near Protocol.
I guess one of the things that Arroz Studios does that's very helpful is they try to focus on artists and get them into the Web3 world, saying there's a benefit here. You can always write smart contracts that pay you in the long run, and this is why you want to get involved with blockchain, and here's why you want to do it now. So in this podcast, people might not be aware of layer one tokens and Web3 and cryptocurrency, their eyes might be rolling.
Yeah, Web 1 is about reading. Web 2, you can also write, but benefits from the content are actually still centralized. So a bunch of big companies are keeping the gains and the profits from this content.
Yeah, so
Whereas Web 3 allows the individual content creators to actually get incentivized. So it's a web of value of some sort. And then you have all these coins, the centralization blockchain that allows for that, but it's the mean to achieve the web value.
Yeah, so Web 2 would be an example of if I uploaded a video to a very mainstream social, site, and a lot of people watched it and it became viral, I made that video, but I gave it to that company, so they essentially own it with my permission, and they might make money on that because they're serving ads, and they might give me some back if they feel like it.
Yeah.
And that's enough for people to live, for the very top percentage of people,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
decided by this company.
Web3 is all about cutting the intermediary. It's a trustless system. So you remove the intermediary. You don't need someone in the middle between your creation and the actual consumer. You cut that third part because it's unnecessary thanks to the technological
No middle
technological
person.
means. No middle person, yeah, exactly.
Oh, so can you talk a little bit about traditional finance versus decentralized finance?
Well, it's actually, it relates a lot with what I just said about the trustless system. So, when you're a bank, you want to pay, buy something in a shop, you always have an intermediary, which is the bank. And what DeFi allows for is basically cutting that middleman, again, that intermediary, by allowing two individuals, two entities, to actually interact and transact between themselves without the intermediary. Thanks to cryptography mainly, that's why we talk about cryptocurrency. You have cryptographic ways of removing that middleman and ensure that the transaction is safe and can be trusted without having to trust any intermediary. With DeFi would allow some individuals with some capital to actually put that money in a pool and allowing other people to actually borrow that money without having an intermediary. And so all the benefits, the interest rate that one will be paying will actually go directly. I say directly, it's of course you have
More
a
or
small
less.
fee, but the fee is much, much lower than in the traditional system because it's all automatized. And it's all written in a piece of code that runs on the blockchain, which is kind of a decentralized database, which allow for the system to be automated, immutable, and you can trust it because it's trustless.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Renaissance and
No,
financial
there is a
systems.
transition for that, even going from the bank perspective. As you might know, the oldest bank in the world was actually creating during the Renaissance. I don't know if you know, but Monte dei Paschi di Siena, something Italian bank that was created in 1472, if I'm not mistaken. I remember that date because they are very well known for having rejected Columbus when he was asking for money to, go onto his journey to America, to
Wow.
India. And so he did that in 1492. Arrived in America. And one of the big things that got invented in Renaissance is actually the whole banking system. A lot of stuff appeared then. So yeah, the double booking, double entry, the way to actually track the assets versus the liabilities. That's one very important part of innovation. But also that's when you actually had banks starting to lend money to entrepreneurs and explorers in that case. And that's actually kind of at the basics of the modern economy. Without in our case, the banks lending money, you wouldn't have, the moms and pop shop. A big part of the economy is actually small companies that relies on loans to exist. And that actually existed from the Renaissance.
So before the Renaissance, it was kings, and it was you're physically walking around with gold, and maybe someone steals it from you. And then at some point, they say, let's have a system. Let's say that I owe you this, and you owe me this, and we have a piece of paper, and we're going to acknowledge this piece of paper. So there's this trust system that's established that moves beyond borders. Sounds a little familiar.
Very centralized to my taste, but it's been working for 600 years, so kudos to that. But I think there is a link here and a parallel to do between this revolution of the financial system with what's happening now with DeFi. It's a total change of paradigm, so I don't exactly know what's going to happen, but what I know is that the rules are different. It's not going to behave the same way, and some entities are probably going to explore that and find new ways of financing the economies and opening doors for all sort of projects and endeavors that maybe did not exist before the same way it happened in the Renaissance.
Okay, so yeah, in the Renaissance, all of a sudden you have this mercantile system, you have all these new opportunities, and someone like Christopher Columbus could go to a bank and say, hey, I have this plan, I need to get a lot of money for this boat to go overseas because I have this idea that something's going to happen. It sounds like a startup.
Yeah,
And
very much.
he's asking this bank, and this bank's like, no, dude, you're crazy.
Yeah, it's too much risk. The VCs were not ready to take that risk, most of them, but some did, and I think it paid off quite well.
It is literally venture capitalism. Like, it's
Exactly.
adventure capitalism.
Big upsides, taking risk. That's what it is. And when I started working, actually my first internship in France, I worked in securitization during Lehman, by the way. That was very
Oh,
fun.
Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, Lehman Brothers. I actually started my internship end of August 2008, and beginning of September was when Lehman went bankrupt.
Fun times.
Yeah, very fun times.
And that's where cryptocurrency became.
Yeah, Bitcoin was basically born from the 2008 crisis, so it appeared actually 1 year later. But if you read like some Satoshi Nakamoto's manifesto and the Bitcoin white paper, Bitcoin was built for financial and bank crisis, and that's why, in the light of the recent events with Signature, First Republic Bank, Silicon Valley, I guess that's also why Bitcoin price is not crashing these days along with banks, is because it's actually maybe becoming a good and recognized alternative because it was really built for this type of time.
Well, I think that just because it was first, it's always going to be somewhat popular, although I hate that it's proof of work versus proof of stake because it's just terrible for the environment on purpose.
I mean, yeah, again, that's another debate, but I would say that, weirdly enough, that the proof of work aspect, that's what gives it some kind of idea of robustness in front of, the crisis, because, I mean, what's more actually tangible than energy? I mean, Bitcoin is literally made of energy. That's how it works. That's how you create it. You need to have electricity.
It was made that it was so hard to copy, to break, to steal that you might as well put the energy into mining it. So it kind of gave you a distraction of a task to do, and you got rewarded.
Exactly. That's how it works. You basically, the participants are incentivized to be good actors. If they're not, they will lose money. It actually costs more to be a bad actor. That's why it's working. That's why it makes the Bitcoin white paper such an elegant idea.
Okay. What are some memories about high school or growing up in France that you heard about the Renaissance? Because we typically think of the Renaissance happening in Italy, but French people definitely embrace this time period.
But yeah, François Ier, Francis the First.
Let's say it sounds better in French. Say it in French.
François Ier was a very famous patron of Léonard de Vinci, as we say in France. Léonard de Vinci, and he basically gave him a lot of money for him to be the genius inventor and artist that he was. So yeah, François Ier is a very famous face of the Renaissance, with this probably the most famous date in history. When you ask, give me a historical date for the French history to a French person, probably 8 times out of 10 they will say 1515, Marignan battle. 1515 Marignan. It's kind of this, I don't know why, but this one date is kind of a useless battle. It's the battle of the beginning of the reign of François Ier. But it's the one date from French history which, for no reason and no particular appeal, everybody knows about.
Really?
Yeah, 1515 Marignan.
1515.
1515 Marignan battle.
It's like asking someone, pick a card, any card, and have people say ace of spades, or pick a number 1 to 10, they say 7.
Yeah, that's also a time and where you had actually quite tragic events in France with the war on religion, religious wars, les guerres de religion. And you have a lot of events. It kind of spanned over the course of 100 years, kind of stopped with Henri IV was king of France, and he was married to one of the daughters of Catherine de Medici.
He's married to a Medici.
Yeah, I mean, this time all the kings are kind of brother assistants or cousins somehow. But yeah, I think it's also interesting to recognize that these religious wars actually came out of perhaps the biggest event from the Renaissance, which is the invention of printing. By Gutenberg.
Printing press, yeah.
Exactly. Printing press allowed the Bible to be, read by actually a lot more people than it used to, and that's what led to the creation of, Protestantism.
Protestantism, yeah.
And actually, a lot of Protestants fled to Germany at that time, and yeah, it kind of reshaped the whole country in that period.
So in a way, you have opinions, you have manifestos, you have everyday people. I guess the literacy rates varied.
Of course. But now it becomes possible. It's a change of paradigm. And again, I think there are a lot of interesting parallels with cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, which would allow some people to get access to value in that case. Typically, you were talking about video. in a few years' time, I'm kind of sure of it. There will be some platforms where you can cut, the big company, where you can actually put your video, share it with people, and actually get the benefits from it being viewed by millions of people, almost 100% to you, instead of giving the big share to a big company.
Yeah, if only someone made a service where you could upload videos and actually benefit from media and share it and remix it with other people.
That's exactly that. Yeah, it opens the door for this kind of.
I would say the other comparison is you have this printing press, you have someone that's able to scale their knowledge and get it to a lot of other people. It's kind of like social media posts.
And with blockchain, you can own what you create, and not only intellectually, also financially. And that's a big change of paradigm that I think is going to have a lot of impact. So yeah, we talked about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is using this blockchain technology, as it's called.
It's a ledger.
Yeah, exactly. It's a decentralized ledger, a big ass notebook.
A big ass notebook.
To use technical terms, that is copied everywhere in the world by all the people maintaining the network. So you have a biggest notebook with a biggest number of copies everywhere, which has cryptographically certified to be all identical. In the case of Bitcoin, in this notebook, you write a list of transactions. Every time a new transaction happens, you add it in the notebook and it gets copied everywhere. That's how it works. For smart contract, instead of writing this transaction, you can actually store some small pieces of code that can get executed on the blockchain. That's the big revolution happening with Ethereum, which is the name of the blockchain on which smart contracts can be run. The not easy part is actually to execute the code on the database without messing up the.
So you have to create a new system that implements that. So we had Bitcoin and then Ethereum, and Ethereum was developed separately.
It's using the same kind of principles, the technology, but yeah, the fact that it's able to have like smart contract running on it is a completely new thing compared to Bitcoin. Ethereum appeared like 5 or 6 years after Bitcoin, so it's a lot more recent, really.
And it's more efficient. It costs less to do every transaction.
Not exactly. It depends on the network congestion. As we explained, like you need a lot of people to maintain that network and to make sure these copies of the notebooks are the same everywhere. And if you have a lot of people actually wanting to write stuff on these notebooks, well, you need a lot more people maintaining the system. And to make it work, they need to be incentivized. And if there are more people, you need to pay more for the same service, basically.
Okay.
We just offer on demand. And that's what happened in the NFT craze a couple of years ago. Basically, a lot of users wanted to use Ethereum, so to be able to write something, to execute something, to use really this technology, well, you had to pay for it, and not a lot of people were not enough people. And anyway, even you have like technological limits that prevent it to be really scalable as it is right now, and that's why Ethereum is still in evolution. It keeps changing, and you have progress being done here, but it's still not completely scalable. And the consequence of that is like it's still a bit slow and quite expensive to use.
Well, it could be designed to be more cost effective.
Yes, it will be. You have like new stuff. Typically, it was before using proof of work. So proof of work is, as we briefly said, is like you basically do some work, use electricity to prove that the notebook is correctly copied on
solve
the
puzzles,
correct.
Essentially. Use your graphics card and waste a lot of electricity.
Exactly. And a more economic solution in terms of energy to that is called proof of stake. No need to really get into the details, but it's using game theory. And instead of really using a lot of energy, it's using probability to achieve the same result without using electricity, or much less. We're talking like maybe 1,000 times less, something like that.
One thing I noticed going from one group of people who were, digital nomads that were not Web3 and then hanging out at Arroz Estudios. And I remember in one day, people were talking about gas for cars. Like, oh my God, the gas is going up in these prices and it costs me so much to drive from here to here. And then I went to Arroz Studios and they're like, oh man, the gas fees are going to go down soon, but right now they're really bad. And I thought, wow, you're in a different world where like that means something else for the livelihood and the daily activities of these people.
Yeah, the creator of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, wanted to call gas mana actually because he was a big word. But he wanted to call that mana instead of gas. Maybe it would have made things clearer for this type of situation.
Yeah, maybe. I think gas is it's the means to have something done, and you are using energy. So I think it is good to just think about so you want to use less of it generally. One of the things we talked about was smart contracts, and a smart contract is an agreement between two people that through code is automatically executed. So you don't need this middleman, similar to transactions. So if you say if you come in here wearing a red shirt on a Tuesday, you have to give me $20. And you're like, what? And like,
Yeah, exactly. You can achieve some more complex mechanism with this. You were talking transaction. This is fairly basic. It's point A, point B, and an amount. So here with smart contract, you can have a whole logic, complex logic.
okay, so why don't we name like a few of the Ethereum and friends group that are more similar to these that have this later technology. So we have Ethereum. We talked about Near, which is a layer one.
There are quite a few. So you have like this, Ethereum virtual machine, Ethereum compatible. So you have a bunch.
Algorand, also friends with the.
No, Algorand is not EVM. They have smart contracts, but they're not EVM compatible. No, it's more like Avalanche.
Tezos?
Tezos is not
Celo?
EVM compatible. Celo is. You have a lot of. That's what we call layer one. You kind of mentioned the terms earlier. Layer one is all this kind of infrastructure blockchain that allows to basically make the blockchain technology run, and that's how you pay gas. So it's not the only one, but yeah, typically the layer one token. So all these names that we are dropping are actually cryptocurrencies that you can use to pay gas on the blockchain infrastructure that it's maintaining.
So if you're in a party or an event or let's say an art gallery, it's probably one or two tokens that they're going to accept at this event. But if you want to translate one to another, it's like different countries exchanging currencies where you can connect. And then Ethereum, because a lot of this actually is, they're forks of Ethereum sometimes with extra bells and whistles features. And so there is this Ethereum virtual machine compatible EVM, and it allows them to interchange with minimal costs.
It's easier, yes. So when it's EVM compatible, that means that you can, without a centralized intermediary, exchange Ethereum. EVM compatible means you can use smart contract with the same language than Ethereum. It's called Solidity. It's a language. Yeah. It looks like JavaScript a bit, and that's the language. So basically, if by using Solidity you can code smart contract on the blockchain, that's EVM compatible. That's kind of the easy.
Okay. So and when you're writing a Solidity contract, you're saying this person gets this if that.
Yeah, that's one thing that you can do, but you can code whatever mechanism you want to code. It's really up to you. It's coding. You do what the fuck you want.
Give me some examples.
So NFT is a smart contract. You have DAO system, so voting system. It's a smart contract as well. Semi-fungible contract, where in the smart contract you write the logic so that you can have different kind of NFT type, but each NFT type would have an unlimited amount. And semi-fungible standard that's used for video games, for instance. In one unique contract, you would have like, swords, bows, I don't know, clothes, hats, boots, whatever, and with unlimited or not amount of items that you can create. We say mint for NFTs, and some of them are unlimited. And by having an unlimited supply, that makes them kind of fungible.
So you've given some talks at Arroz Studios. You've been a host. You've done panels. And one time you had a screen behind you. You had some people with beers in their hand watching you with a lot of attention from all over Europe, as that happens at Arroz Studios on Wednesdays sometimes. And you described what an NFT was, and you described the scenario of walking down the street. For NFTs versus fungible tokens, if in a fungible scenario, if you walk down the street and you bump into someone and you each have $2 in your pocket of coins, could be quarters, dimes, nickels, I'm using American currency,
Sure.
and it all falls over the floor and it all mixes together and you're trying to pick up pieces. As long as it adds up to $2, you don't care if you got dimes instead of quarters. That's fungible. That's, hey, okay, the money's, whatever. Okay, have a good day, sir. If you're walking and you bump into the same person, but you don't have money in your pocket, you have pictures,
baseball cards.
Something that means, like, if I have a picture of my nephew and you have a picture of your daughter, we bump into each other, they fall in the street. I'm not going to take a picture of your daughter because that's creepy. But also because it just doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. It's really not the same.
And that's an NFT. That's non-fungible. It's saying this is important to me because I said so.
Yeah. So that's the physical example of a non-fungible thing. And when we talk about NFT, that's kind of the equivalent in the digital world. So what the technology and smart contract allow for is like to trace and to be able to track and identify who is the owner of a given like object, digital object, which in this case is actually called an NFT, and the token being a way to digitally verify the property, the ownership of a given digital object by a digital wallet. Here with like smart contracts and NFTs, you have ways technically to be creative with the idea of ownership. Whereas before, anytime you want to invent something new, you have to actually write contracts, get them verified by lawyers, and get the law to accept that being like tested in a court. With smart contracts, you just try something and it's like tested by computer, by cryptography.
And the money shows up on the account.
Yeah, if it works, if it doesn't get hacked, yeah.
And they all do break pretty often. They're breaking before they work.
So yeah, there is always a risk that typically does not really exist in the physical world. You have different kind of risks.
So one of the benefits of smart contracts that I've heard described at Arroz Studios is if you're the original artist, like if you were Picasso and you made your first painting, and then you sold it to someone for, let's say, $20. We're using current currencies. And then, let's say 10 years later, you're famous, your work sells for $200,000. The original piece of art that you sold that's owned by someone else, that value goes up. But the artist, let's say Picasso in this instance, does not get the benefit of that. So that's like the basic understanding. We have a new generation of artists now who are creating content. It could be audio, could be video, could be JPEGs. For some reason, it always seems like NFTs start out as JPEGs of ugly creatures. So they're creating this stuff, and then they're putting it out there to be sold, but they put in a smart contract. If you ever transfer it with anyone else, I'm getting a percentage.
So that depends on how the smart contract has been written. It is possible, thanks to the smart contract technology, to actually write the mechanism so that inside this transfer function, you can embed a royalty percentage so that if the piece is sold, the original creator will get a cut. It's just it's a simple rule to write with codes, with Solidity, for instance, that you write and it will stay. The smart contract, as everything with blockchain, is immutable, so you cannot change it. So as long as the object is there on the blockchain, which is supposedly forever, if it gets sold, the original creator will get a cut because it's written in the code. Yeah, it's a set of rules. They are written. Then how it's used by, mere humans is another question.
Mere humans, I love that.
But the rule doesn't change. It's there, and it can be modified.
Okay, so we see that use case for NFTs. And why are NFTs always static images? Or
They're not. They can be. I mean, that's kind of maybe the sad part of all this. It's like NFTs kind of got this hype with the Bored Apes. I mean, basically choose an adjective, choose an animal, and a yacht club, and boom, you have a collection. And I mean, obviously that's not backed by anything. So that's kind of sad, to be honest. But the technology that's behind it is much more powerful than that. As I explained, it's really just a digital way of verifying ownership. And that piece of technology is very, very valuable and can have application in a lot more things and a lot more important things than picture of monkeys. So I don't really care about the golden banana stuff, but technically we're talking about ownership. So I think one of the biggest probably narratives that's going to emerge in the years to come is like what we call the real world assets. They're going to get tokenized, and basically the ownership of real world assets will probably somehow be backed by smart contracts and recognized kind of as real life NFTs.
Okay, so it's about tagging physical objects. It could even be a physical painting, or which we have seen some of that, like fractionalized NFTs.
That's also. I mean, again, you can get very creative with a smart contract. It's just a piece of code, so you can write whichever rule you want. Then it's all about making it useful enough so that it gets adopted.
Let's say, for example, Mona Lisa. Hey, Renaissance art. So you have the Mona Lisa, you make a grid and you say, okay, you get this little corner of this spot and this is yours technically, even though it's going to stay in this museum. You own it. Maybe you get a pass to visit and see it because you have this token.
Yeah, it could be a creative way to try and get money. It's not the one I'm the most excited about, to be blunt, but yeah, it's feasible.
One of the things you worked on was a project called Enrollment too.
So it's similar. It's like trying to find a creative way of using the technology, but without using it as a link to a monkey JPEG. The way we actually use NFTs was to digitally verify that you are the members of an association. In our case, of course, Arroz Studios. So typically, when you go to a club, it's quite common in Lisbon. You would receive a small card that proves that you're a member, and you pay €3 for that. And without this card, you basically can't enter the premises.
And they exist because, for some reason, if you're a social club and you join it, the rules are different about how you charge for things, and you're not a bar.
Yeah, there's the non-profit aspect, etc.
But it's like I've seen them in a lot of places. Like even in Italy, it's like, oh, it's a social club, pro local or something, and it has a number, and there's it's linked to my email and stuff, and I'm a member of this place. And because I have it every time I show up, I don't have to buy a new one. And that was a physical membership. And then so enrollment is normally the word, but this is called enrollment because you're minting an NFT. Good name. I'd say good name.
Yeah, it's a good name. The minting of NFTs kind of goes back to the minting of a coin. But that's the term you use to, you don't say create an NFT, you say mint an NFT.
And so with this concept at Arroz Studios, you have a membership there through this enrollment program.
So yeah, it's a distinct company that we're building to do that. But to be fair, without getting into the details of NFTs for the mere users, and I think that's the way this technology will get adopted. They don't need to know it's NFTs. Technically, nobody cares. The important part is they have like a digital proof of membership, and they can show it at the entrance. Whether it's backed by NFTs is not important to them for now, but the fact that it is kind of opens a lot of doors in feasibility of, well, a lot of features. You can actually reward them if you build the product and the tech behind it. You could involve them in voting for some kind of decision around the association. They could get rewarded. Maybe if we have some ways to check when they get in, that's also how you can invent quite easily a loyalty program. All this technology and Web3 in general opens a lot of doors, so you can do a lot of stuff. Then you need to do them and create the products, but it opens a lot of doors and gives a lot of ideas.
So technically, enrollment is almost like a beta prototype for this company, this concept that could be used in a lot of other places.
Yeah, any kind of organization, really.
And what chain are you using for that?
We built it on Near because we got a grant from Near Protocol to build it. We're actually looking for partners to continue working on the product. Right now we hit that stage where we have like a working proof of concept, the basic MVP, I even want to say, that we've been using at Arroz Studios. We've been actually creating about 1,500 membership NFTs that have been transferred to Arroz Studios members. So yeah, the product is working, but as I was explaining, now we have all these ideas that we want to implement to actually leverage on this technology, this great technology that's behind it. And to do that, we're looking for partners.
Okay, that's exciting to know. We have talked about NFTs, we've talked about smart contracts, we've talked about the base of Ethereum. I think this is a good 101, or actually if you do know about the blockchain communities, you're probably still following along here pretty well. But then there's also DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations, which are what I describe as a hippie commune with cryptocurrency to decide things. Because it's like you're living off the land as a group but you're using this, new technology in between.
I think there are a bit too many rules for hippie communities, but DAOs are a great way to programmatically enforce some rules in advance to prepare for an event that's forthcoming. Typically, that's very much useful for money transfers. So you would decide in advance how an income of money is going to be divided between a certain number of participants, and you can actually put that in a smart contract, as we've been explaining, which ensures that at the time of money distribution, it actually goes as approved beforehand. So that's a typical example. It's also a very smart contract I use also for voting. It basically, all the smart contracts that help make DAOs function help like automatizing the whole decisioning process and the management of money typically. But I mean, then you can get creative and do other stuff, but the typical example is really how to manage money and revenues.
When I introduced my interns to these concepts about Web3 and NFTs and DAOs, we looked at the interface Near being one of the more user-friendly interfaces, and they still wanted to see it go further in terms of the design. And we were actually looking at this from a UX perspective, so it was interesting. They said, okay, this is like a college organization. We're learning about things, we're deciding things, we have a budget, we're deciding where it's going, and that's how we want to run it. And so they had a different vision about how to design it, which is kind of where I see a lot of these moving into. Or there's been like companies that operate as DAOs, where it's who's the boss. Again, it's just like any cryptocurrency. They're everywhere and nowhere. So there are roles in a DAO, but there's also like voting. Like what else happens in a DAO?
I mean, again, it's kind of up to whatever you decide. But the good thing and the advantage here is like all these rules, whichever you decide, you can actually write them in a contract. and make sure they get executed whatever happens. So that's a good way also to settle disputes. You basically write the rules when everybody is very friendly with each other, so that when it's not the case anymore, because sadly that happens sometimes, you actually know what's going to happen because it was written in the past, and that's going to get executed.
And it just happens
Blockchain is immutable, yes.
because it's a smart contract.
Exactly, it's written as is. So it can be about deciding who is going to be the boss if there is some kind of issues, some settlement around the money. Again,
It could be a cap table, it could be who owns what percentage of the company or what kind of equity does an employee get in a company based on automatic rules, not based on if I feel like actually
exactly.
doing what I said.
And that's why I don't really have a definite answer, is because there are a lot of experimentation going on like right now as we speak, in some ways to actually make that robust, some kind of, it's a trial period where people are trying stuff, and maybe we'll see in a few years how to make sure that the DAO organization and this set of rules that are written in the smart contract actually fit also the legal aspect. It's been like, at some point it's going to be tested in court, and what's going to happen is actually going to be quite interesting, knowing that in all cases the DAO will continue to operate as it was prepared for the better or for the worse, we don't know, because if you write bad rules, well, the bad rules will get executed. You can't change it afterward.
And it depends what country you're in and where it's incorporated. Like Wyoming in the U.S. is
That's
the Delaware of DAOs.
between the U.S. states. Yeah, Wyoming, Delaware is also a classic place where you want to create your LLC. But what's going to happen in Europe is interesting. And again, with this new technology, it's also very interesting to see what's going to happen in all other countries all over the world, where the crypto people are actually pretty active as well.
Well, one thing I saw recently was Portugal. One of the reasons why a lot of Web3 people ended up showing up here is because Portugal forgot to tax for cryptocurrency.
I don't know if they forgot, but yeah, they did not.
They considered it a currency fluctuation. Why would we charge if the euro or the dollar changed? We're not going to tax you on that. And then people just started showing up because they were making money when there was this large growth period. And they would come here and say, I need to live here now because I want to be able to exchange it and turn it into a stable coin or real money, fiat currency without these consequences. And then as of this year, January 1st, they put in new rules pretty quickly, emulating what Germany's doing in terms of if you hold it for a year, we're not going to tax you, but you have to register it and all this stuff. But we have seen that Portugal had this huge growth with the Web3 community. Also with the war in Ukraine, that Russia had invaded them, a lot of developers, a lot of people that created some of these layer one technologies moved here to Portugal. It made Lisbon more important, and more of the developers, there was parties, there still are, but there was parties like 3 times a week, and you'd all have events on Wednesday, which would annoy me because I didn't know which one to go to, where I would jump from a few. There are still some big Web3 events here and technology events, but there is this kind of growth and decrease period that happens kind of based on how cool or like how well the money is performing.
Yeah, definitely. And there are up and down. I think that's why I'm not sure they really forgot to tax. I feel like it was part of this whole dynamic and initiative from Portuguese government to incentivize the arrival of digital nomads in general. So anyone working in tech was kind of welcome, and crypto people are tech people after all.
Okay. Now, let's talk about a governance strategy. One of the things we started talking about after a while was the project I'm working on, which is VIX Tape, which is mashups of audio, video, and data combined in new ways. And as I created that, being a programmatic advertising person, I was tasked with the job of writing out the larger system of how the media exchange mechanics worked. It ended up becoming this large thing that was about exchanging media, ads, preferences, data, and currency. So essentially everything. And one of the things that I wrote a few years ago was, it could be cryptocurrencies, it could be some sort of media token, trying to be as broad as possible. And so this was the instructions, this is the goal of the project. And as I went to learn more about cryptocurrencies, DAOs, smart contracts in general, I saw there was a correlation. So we started talking about it a lot. We had some whiteboard sessions here in this room. And we started saying, well, how does this actually get run? How does it run itself? How does this scale? What are the possibilities here as a company? But there was the concept of just general Ethereum and smart contracts in general. So there was the word smart contracts there. But when we looked at it, it was, okay, I am buying this thing and generally some crypto thing's going to happen and you're going to get this. And we said, okay, we need to implement more rules. How do we create the system? So as we looked at this, one of the challenges was it wasn't just a whole media file. It was a piece of a media file and there was a different data profile for that. So it was like a sub NFT. And fractionalized NFTs exist, but when it went into an exchange market that had ad-supported models and subscription models, and you're playing just a piece of content and you have multiple stakeholders and there's no centralization, how does that work? So that was the hot mess that we jumped into and decided to try to figure out. And we came up with some phrases and terms, and one of the things we talked about was
Non-fungible fraction, if I remember correctly.
NFF, non-fungible fraction. Now I tend to refer to it more as a fractionalized streaming NFT.
Yeah, you can as well. But as you said, the fractionalized NFT exists, but when you fractionalize an NFT, you're kind of making the NFT fungible. So it's kind of a fungible NFT in some ways. Whereas in your idea, because you wanted to identify certain parts of the stream, so like for instance, the 5 first seconds are maybe more important than the last 5. Typically, to do that, you need to identify the 5 first second. And again, I'm using identify to insist on the non-fungibility aspect. So that's where the non-fungibility fraction came, because the 5 first second are actually not the same than the last 5.
And that's a piece of one media element, and then you're combining it in a compilation with other, maybe there's different songs, maybe there's other layers on top. Maybe I made one and then you took it and edited it slightly.
Yeah, it's a big melting pot of NFTs.
So there needs to be a quick, fast way to like hypermint all this stuff and these elements.
Yeah, if everything happens on the blockchain, because of the technological constraints, it's going to be hard to achieve the kind of performance you need. So yeah, in terms of technology here required, there's probably need to be an off-chain intermediary. But regardless, what you want is really being able to identify these parts, because in your whole idea, the whole ecosystem of Mixtape, you want to find a mechanism to incentivize, well, the original creators of any kind of streaming, but also the remixers, the editors.
The curators, the NFT owners, which is almost like a cap table. It changes over time. And then it goes into a general exchange. And then the money that's coming in is actually not just for purchasing. Instead of just owning like a JPEG NFT, you're an owner of a element that's going to be streamed or served to somebody. And so it's almost like having a house and renting it out.
Yeah,
instead
exactly.
of just owning it.
Except here, it's not a house, it's like a part of the house. And if you get the entrance, maybe you get more money because more people are passing
So it's
by.
Airbnb in your bedroom.
It's like a micro B&B where you actually cut the different parts of the house and get benefits from the whole rent depending on how much the part of the house is used. Except it's not a house, it's streaming.
And over time and based on views, and there's no middle.
Exactly. But the way it's defined on a fraction, the ownership, it actually defines which share you get from the global revenue.
And so another thing we talked about beyond this was, so it could be used in this ecosystem for media content to make your own TV channels or however else you want to display it based on what's programmed in there. But then there's also the use that these sub-minting stamps could be used in other places. So we were using the code name Intra.Luxe.
Yeah, because once you have this technology, the fractions that's put in place, I mean, yeah, you can apply that to sharing like the revenues from ads companies. You could use the fractionalization in many ideas. I mean, this idea of Airbnb and sharing a house actually could work as well. I mean, why not? And it's actually a different concept. But still, the technology that's behind it, the way you fractionalize something, works the same way. It's just the something that changed, but technically you're doing the same kind of mechanism, and I'm using mechanism because in the back end it's like a smart contract doing kind of something similar.
Yeah. So probably EVM compatible in any way, but it can work on many chains once the system is set up.
Yeah, I mean, again, the thing with like this whole blockchain technology and Web3 industry, most of the things are actually open source.
There's a question of proprietary versus
yeah,
business
exactly.
uses.
But I mean, that's what happened with Ethereum, as you rightfully said. It's all open source, so if you want, you can create your new Ethereum, and that's what some people did. You need the power, like the servers and the adoption.
And the community.
The community, exactly. Enough user to actually make it relevant. But there are a lot of copycat of Ethereum. There are like really a lot. Like Binance did this, basically. The Binance chain is a copy of Ethereum, taken like forked, as you rightfully said, like a few years ago, and it's working fine. I mean, it's maintained by Binance. If you check at the decentralization score, it's lower than Ethereum because you have fewer users but bigger set of servers. So also that's why maybe some stuff are better. It's a bit faster, a bit less expensive because you have fewer users. So yeah, it's a whole like balance. It's a lot of compromise between security, speed, centralization score. You have a lot of parameters to take into account. So as you said, so we have this idea of how the mechanism works to distribute the revenues, but this actually would follow a set of rules. And the question we had we wanted to cover was who is deciding these rules? How much money do you get? What's the percentage? How much get the creator, the curator, the platform, etc. And this set of rules, this decisioning can actually be taken as a group, as a DAO, by some community members, a set of people. All the decisions about how the money is going to be shared can be put in a smart contract that which itself would be called by all the participants of the ecosystem to know where the money is going, who the money is going to, depending on the use case, depending on whichever rules are really written. But the decision about the rules can be taken as a DAO with like a DAO system of voting.
Well, also when there's voting, there's kind of like people that try to, there's always some jerk who wants to take over and sort of use the system, or someone has more resources so they control things. And so you were proposing this concept that you kind of show how many tokens you have versus someone else, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have different ways of defining who is going to be allowed to vote, who is going to be allowed to make a proposal. That's, I mean, the way this works and what I'm describing is actually used like these days for actually quite a few years in a lot of DeFi product, DeFi communities. So you have Aave, Maker, Compound. All these DeFi companies actually work as a DAO. So they take, so community members, depending on their number of tokens, are allowed to make proposals, submit that to a vote by the community. And yeah, then it depends. Sometimes it's like, if you have more than 0 token, you are allowed to vote. Sometimes you need like, there is a threshold. Sometimes the more token you have, the bigger your vote. That's a typical one. But yeah, it can get hijacked by some investors. Typically it happened recently actually with A16Z, which is a big VC company, having like a big chunk of the token for a given DeFi protocol, and they decided to vote for something that was actually giving advantages to another company that were owning. So there can be conflict of interest. The rules have to be really well thought of, because you can have this kind of issues when you have people having too many tokens, actually messing up with the decentralization ethos that's supposed to rule the decentralized world.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's still people agreeing on things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And people make mistakes.
Yeah, they are greedy, they have interest, that's human nature. But finding the right set of rules, the framework for it to work regardless is the big challenge for the years to come.
I would say that DAOs are kind of in this hot mess stage right now where they're kind of working, but you really need a hybrid management system with a board.
Yeah, not necessarily, but yeah, the concept of a board can be actually implemented. It's possible. You basically define in advance a number of people that are going to be elected by the rest and take some decision with like a certain duration. You decide on a mandate in number of months, of years, whatever you want, probably a month. And you make sure that it rolls, that you enforce like some security emergency situation. Probably you have to think a bit in advance, and that's why we're in this kind of period right now where people are testing things, and some of them are gonna pass the test of time, some of them won't. And we'll definitely be in a better place in a couple of years, that's for sure.
Is there any comparison we can make to the Renaissance with collective aggregated management of things?
And the Renaissance, you have to go a bit before that, but the Renaissance was kind of the top of the mountain. But to get there, you had like the print press invention was a big one, because it actually had people to connect. The roads were getting in better shape. The whole infrastructure is getting better, and that's what helped people to actually communicate and engage with each other. And that leads to kind of an intellectual effervescence, and that's what happened in the Renaissance. And again, the tools that are being delivered to us, we are actually able to access now, also allows for this effervescence of ideas, this innovation, creativity, and that's what can lead to a change of paradigm and like big changing, like world-changing innovation revolution even.
Intellectual effervescence, is that what you said?
Yeah.
That is so French. It sounds so pretty when you say it.
Intellectual effervescence. I don't know, it's in normal.
I like that. It's like very flowery.
Yeah, I mean it rhymes with Renaissance, right?
Yeah, effervescence, Renaissance. Yeah, I'll count that. So yeah, you're saying that there's a system and there's things are being built upon it, and it's really about people who normally wouldn't have interacted or communicated being able to join into something and collaborate.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the slope. So when the infrastructure improves, like we were talking roads and print press at the Renaissance, at first you're like, well, okay, it doesn't change anything. Like for a couple of years, and even more than that, I think at Renaissance, because the thing was not as fast as now. It felt like nothing was changing, but actually it was starting to boil, and then suddenly it gets parabolic, exponential, and again
hockey stick.
Yeah, that's what's happening with crypto as well. It's like we are at the beginning of this slope. Internet was the same. It takes 10 years to get your first, 10% users, but then in 10 years you reach 90%.
Yeah.
And you never exactly know when this kind of curve, the slope of the curve is going to get parabolic, but it happens.
But you think it's happening now?
I think we are we're there. Whether it's gonna happen next year or in 5, it's kind of hard to say. But when you look at the numbers, like the adoption of, do you own cryptocurrency? Have you used internet? That you ask these two questions with 25, 30 years apart, and it's taking kind of the same shape. And in internet equivalent right now, we're like in 1997, more or less.
Okay.
And you know what's interesting?
That was a good year.
Do you know when Google was actually founded?
I'm going to guess 1997.
In 1997. So that means like the next biggest actor of the crypto space maybe is going to get created this year. Or got created 6 months ago. Okay, maybe. I have a margin of error. I'm not perfect.
Maybe it's Intra.Luxe.
Maybe.
That's one of the things I love to compare here in this show that we have. Just this idea that we had this moment of going from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance, and then here we are with all this new technology coming. We've had the internet for a while, we've had social media, but now we have this new way of relating information, and we're having this exponential growth potential, and we're still figuring it out, and we're kind of confused and looking around and experimenting.
Yeah, it takes time, and also in addition to that, I would say that AI is also the other kind of revolution that's kind of hitting us right in the face for the past few months, to be fair. And I feel like it's going to be quite interesting to see how that's changed the world and how there's going to be like a interconnection between the two. Typically, and it's kind of starting to happen with AI, you can't trust anything that you see anymore. So that's typically something where I see there could be a huge benefit in digitally verifying the source of information or any kind of content. And I feel like that's probably where you could get an interesting intersection between AI and blockchain. But yeah, as I said, at the beginning of print press, nobody was realizing what was happening. First revolution, industrial revolution was probably the same. People seeing cars in the streets, they were probably like, who is this crazy motherfucker like driving? What is this? It's a devil machine.
This horse is so ugly.
Exactly. And it kept happening. The people using internet in '94 were probably
nerds.
I mean, Bill Gates in this famous American show being like laughed at. Mail. He's explaining emails, and everybody's like, "That's completely useless. Just give me a piece of paper. That's the same."
What's an internet?
But I feel like we're here with crypto. The crypto bros are made fun of. That's fine, but I feel like that's always what happens at the beginning of a revolution.
Well, you brought up a really good point with artificial intelligence and generation of content and the fact that it can create a scale more than we can. And it's also using data inputs and media inputs and other ways to create new content. And there's some controversy because is it legal that they're doing that? How is this licensed? And it's really, it's experimental now. So it's people putting a bunch of content there to try to get it to propagate itself. But if we did have a way to say this is real, this is fake, this is from this AI, it's almost like a tagging licensing system.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to traceability, and actually traceability is what blockchain is great for. I mean, it's true for supply chain, but it's true for
Trustability?
No, traceability.
Traceability.
Yeah, traceability.
Traceability.
Forgive my accent, mate. Yeah, traceability is actually something blockchain is very useful for, and in the case of AI, there is an obvious use case here. So I feel like that's something that probably will be explored in the years to come, months to come even.
So maybe fractionalized streaming NFTs or NFFs could be the thing that links to AI generated content to tag it and put it out there and say this is real, this is fake.
Yeah, you can certify. Yeah, finding a way to give like a authenticity score. I don't know. You will find a better marketing term than me.
Authenticity score. That's not bad.
Okay.
How about intellectual effervescence?
That's bad.
So one more side comment. Let's talk about your name.
I mean, no, there is a book. That's actually the real story. There was a book allegedly very popular in France called My Friend Gaylord. And that was a book. She loved it.
Okay, yeah, so your name is Gaylord, Gaylord.
Gaylord Warner. I think it has a nice ring to it, the full name. So
yeah, and it sounds good with your accent. And in French, if you were speaking to someone in French, how would you say it?
Gaylord Warner in French, but
Gaylord
Gaylord Warner
Warner.
is like, yeah, I mean, I'm from a British accent. The father of my father was actually British.
Oh, I didn't know. And you're from Brittany?
No, I mean, actually, interestingly, often in France, it happened I mean, a lot of times that people think it's a, I don't know how you say that, but Breton, we say Breton in French, it's a Breton name, but yeah, no, it's not. It's just like allegedly from Old French, but British name.
Yeah, so when I met you, I said, "Wait, what's your name?" And you're like, "I'm Gaylord." And I'm like,
Yeah.
Gaylord. Your name is Gaylord." I was like, "Well, I remember as a kid growing up in upstate New York, I was called Gaylord with another F word after that, and like often, like I am the Lord of the Gays." And I was a kid, so I didn't really have like that identity or association, but it was like kind of triggering. Like, your name is Gaylord, and then we started
Yeah.
like hanging out and working together, and I was like, "Do you have any other like nicknames that you have?" And you
It's not
said
that common,
GL you use a lot.
Interestingly, it's more like British natives, Americans or British people who call me that because I feel like saying Gaylord for them is too weird. Whereas to be fair, in France, this kind of association didn't come until I was like 15 years old or something.
And all French people are a little gay anyway. Well, gay in French is just happy, right?
Yeah, I mean now, yeah, for a few years it changed. Now using gay is always associated with homosexuality. But my sister and some of my friends call me Gege. More like Gege with a A.
Gay.
Gege, yeah.
So I asked you, I was like, "Give me some variations. Like, what else do people call it?" And you said gay. And I
Nah.
said, "Can I claim that?" And you're like, "No,
Gege,
this is for
no.
people that I grew up with." And you get
Even when they do it, I'm not a huge fan. I let them because she's my sister, so that's fine.
yeah.
I have a few friends calling me that, but it's like maybe 4 or 5 people on.
I don't really like being called Mikey or Mike. Michael. It's just Michael. Actually, here I've been using Miguel with certain apps and things like to take cars and stuff.
Gallardo.
Gagliardo. Okay.
Could
So
work.
so the compromise that we were able to come up with was, I said, "Look, Gaylord it's just weird to me. Like, I know I'll probably get over it
Yeah.
at some point, but I was in Michigan and we drove by this town called Gaylord, spelled the same way, but people with a Michigan Midwest accent called it Gaylord. Gaylord, like lurd, and somehow the way that they emphasized it rolled off the tongue, and I said, "Hey, can I call you Gaylord instead of Gaylord?" And you're like, "It sounds the same to me with
Yeah,
my
it's pretty
French
close.
ears." With my French ass ears, this Gaylord sounds the same as
I
Galois or
see the
whatever.
difference, but I mean, I don't really care. You can call me Michel or Pablo if you want.
No, but Gaylord, I like the way they say Gaylord.
Yeah, if it makes you happy, it makes me happy. That's the kind of gay lord that I am.
And we should mention you have a wife and 2 kids.
But yeah, as far as I know, I don't fall under that category.
So tell me about some things you have coming up, like projects, or are you going to be hosting any panels, or?
So we're a bit in the slow season for our shilling and chilling events, but we're looking for sponsors. So if anyone wants to spend a nice Wednesday evening at Arroz and talking about anything crypto related, well, or not really, but engaging with the crypto community of Lisbon, you're more than welcome for a very small fee. We can have a very nice event with beers and pizza. And but yeah, no, on a personal note, I'm actually kind of going back to my engineer background because I have an engineer master's degree, and I used to be a developer before. So I'm actually going to a hackathon like right now.
Yes, like you have to go to your hackathon. What are you going to do at this hackathon?
So it's a zero knowledge hackathon. Zero knowledge proof is a way to verify something without showcasing the content of the something you're trying to prove. And it's actually a pretty powerful piece of technology that's in constant evolution that would typically help to scale up the blockchain technology by, instead of sharing the notebook that we talked about, you would share the proof that you wrote in the notebook, which is much lighter in a sense. So it makes the whole system much faster.
Yeah, I remember one thing that we talked about was what assets of digital media should be on-chain or off-chain, and you're like, you can't put a video in blockchain.
On the blockchain, yeah, you can't.
You can't put like a megabyte, multi-megabyte file. It's just so heavy.
And
Most
even
of
1
it's
megabyte is huge. So
super light text that's linked to that file, which is the whole system about that.
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, I hope you keep going and building some new technologies.
Yeah, I
and
hope so too.
I will see you at Arroz Studios
Yeah,
soon.
gladly.
And good luck with enrollment and your engineering work and our NFFs and fractionalized trading NFTs and all that
my
stuff.
wife and kids, yeah, a lot of jobs I'm doing.
Yeah, you're also a super dad.
Yeah, so I heard.
So you've heard, yeah. Thank you, Gaylord, for coming and being part of the Media Renaissance show.
My pleasure. It was great. Always happy to talk about blockchain, crypto, and NFTs.
Yeah, hire him or Arroz Studios for whatever the hell you want. Bye, everyone.
Perfect. Cheers. Bye.